Hi everyone, this is Olivia with more information on the rule of thirds. I am going to briefly recap about the rule of thirds and then go into more detail about it all and various aspects of some of the images that I posted about previously to give you a better understanding. Okay, let's get started. The rule of thirds says that you are to divide your image into 9 equal parts, 3 across by 3 down, and that you are to avoid using the center section for your focal point, and that you are to use either one or some of the remaining 8 sections for your focal point. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Your focal point can overlap into that center section, and that is fine as long as it doesn't solely contain your focal point. The reason for this is because if you have something totally centered, it is a little static. It doesn't provide as much interest or tension. When you put something off center, it adds more interest. So the viewer will be more engaged with your image. That is what the rule of thirds is all about, for you to be able to create the strongest composition that you can, and also engaging your viewers in the most effective way possible. There are parts that I agree with and parts that I disagree with. You also have to take into consideration all the other variables and aspects of your composition: color, elements, the subject matter, etc. But just in general, I think the rule of thirds is a good thing to use, but not to be pinned down by. Let's start with this image since we're already here. I think this image does fine with the rule of thirds. The sun on the bottom left and the rainbow on the top right, whereas the very center section doesn't contain anything. I think it works well. It's kind of an easier one to figure out. I'm going to put up one now that isn't quite so easy. I created this image and it was all fine. I was trying to create something that did not cause any problems, the rule of thirds. So I was making it on a diagonal and I was trying to use up most of the 9 sections. Well, that was great. My intentions were to create a bouquet of flowers that all flowed together so they would kind of collectively be the focal point. I did not specifically pick out one part to be the shining star of the image. It dawned on me that there might be a problem, and it wasn't with the composition. The composition was fine. It was great. And then it occurred to me it was not great because if you look right smack in the middle there, you are going to see a red poppy. Now, behind these little bars, it doesn't look so obvious, but look at this. Take those bars away and voila. At least to me, it is extremely obvious that that red poppy is exactly in the center. Do you see that? I see it, and to me, there lies a little bit of a problem, potentially, because the image itself is not interfering with the center section. However, that red pops out more than any other part of that image. So this might be a good image to use to show you how something in the center, especially if it has the brightest color, will jump right out at you. So maybe this should be part of the how to use color video and not so much the rule of thirds video. Anyway, your focus to me on this image goes directly to that red poppy. And there's nothing wrong with that if that is what you are wanting to accomplish. If you're not, then you could have a potential problem. So this is one of the areas where I have a little bit of a problem with the rule of thirds. One more quick thing to mention about this is that the rule of thirds is very simple, but yet there are moments when it can be a little bit confusing because there are so many potential variables involved. It will not always pan out to be true. It will not always work out as simply as it is stated. So I guess if I were to give a piece of advice about the rule of thirds, I would say just try to keep it as simple as you can. Not your composition, just using the rule of thirds. Kind of like life, not everything lines up perfectly every time. Just use the basics of it and call it good. Or play around with it like I just did. Here are 2 more images where I have corrected my red poppy. First one, I turned my red poppy into a pink poppy. That helped. And to make it better still, I moved the whole thing down and to the left a little so it would not be dead center in that center section. Now let's talk about the next images. We have 2 images where they're both in the center, which goes against the rule of thirds. And it is very obvious the way I've done these images that they are just smack in the middle of the image, nothing confusing about it whatsoever. There they sit in the middle. Unlike the image I used for the very first image in this video. There's really not a lot to talk about on this because it to me is very apparent. There is definitely a time to not use the rule of thirds, and that is if you are wanting to create a very calming image and you want a direct method to do so. That would be putting your image in the very center because it lets your eyes rest there, and your eyes will typically go to the center first anyway, depending on what is there. So this not using the rule of thirds can be a good tool to use if you're wanting to create a very calming image. Now, having said that, you can create a calming image using the rule of thirds, but this is just a really direct way to do it. And of course, there are exceptions. As I mentioned in the image just a few minutes ago, color makes a difference. The actual object itself makes a difference. Say if you're wanting to create a logo, for example, and you have this very striking image and it's directly in the center. It's not necessarily going to be calming. And one more example is when you're creating a greeting card. Everybody knows that when they're receiving a greeting card, they are to look and get the message visually directly from the front of that greeting card. And then look on the inside of the greeting card to read the message, which reinforces the front of the greeting card, correct? And if the outside of your greeting card is calm, but the inside of your greeting card tells you how excited everything is, there is a fair chance that you will see the image on the front as somewhat exciting. So, in a way, that kind of negates the rule of thirds as well, because a lot of imagery on greeting cards is in the center, or it does have a center focus. But the knowledge that people have about greeting cards makes a difference because they go into it with a preconceived idea. They've been around greeting cards forever, so they know. So if you include that, that makes a difference as well. So these are just generalities, but they do tend to hold true. Now, if you have any questions about what I've talked about so far, please let me know and I'll go into more detail or explain the best that I can. Okay. Moving on, I thought I would mention a few greeting card fronts that you're looking at right now. All 3 of these, while they're larger and just not totally isolated to that one little center section, their focal point is all centered. And I don't think either one of the 2 on the outside give you that calming impression at all. The one in the center sort of does. That's the Birth of Venus, my style. You might get a serene feeling from her, if possible. I just wanted to show you these so you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to greeting cards. So this could apply to many other things as well, not just greeting cards. But if you're creating something and people in general tend to have a preconceived notion of something, that could easily interfere with the rule of thirds. Okay. Now on to the next images. We are going to look at the teddy bear and the scared kitty cat images. The teddy bear is totally in the center. She extends out both horizontally and vertically, but she's in the center. That's the focal point. The kitty cat, its center is along the bottom third. So the kitty cat, there really is no issue when it comes to the rule of thirds. The teddy bear, there is. But I wanted the teddy bear to be calming and sweet, serene. So while I did not follow the rules, I think I wouldn't have done it a different way. I think it is portraying really what I wanted it to. Now, on the kitty cat, I would not have put him in the center because I wanted the extra tension. And being along the bottom, or like the rest of the rule of thirds, anywhere along the outside would have helped create this. Remember when I mentioned that using, I'll call it the anti-rule of thirds, it's the most direct way, the easiest way to achieve certain goals. And so for the teddy bear, this was great. Just plunk her right in the middle and she's good. But now I wanted to go ahead and show you an image of a teddy bear. I accomplished a very similar emotion only using the rule of thirds. So he is sitting off center to the right. And one of the ways to make something like this work effectively is to add other elements that match his mood or what he's doing, etc. And in this case, he was really, really sad because either he was having to leave and go somewhere he didn't want to, or he was really sad because somebody else was leaving and he didn't want them to. Either way, putting luggage fit perfectly with the theme as well as the composition, placement, that sort of thing. And to tie them together, I put a window behind both of them with the curtains kind of billowing, and so that you know that there's a breeze blowing in, and flowers behind that are outside. But so you can see it's pretty easy to make the rule of thirds work if you want to take the time and effort to create your composition that way. And here's just a little additional tidbit. If you're making icons, borders, and such for, say, journaling, scrapbooking, that sort of thing, then that's great. But if you are wanting a complete image, then you need to do something more like this, where you set the scene and complete the scene. I hope that made sense. Alrighty, let's talk about the next group of images. The first one is the mom who's getting recognition, and the second one is the Dangles word imagine. Now both of these, the center section is not anywhere in the main focus. Yay! Especially after my little red poppy incident. Okay, the mom, you can see below where I've made my own little 9 square diagram where I believe she sits in relation to the focus. I think she's all along the left vertical third and the center bottom. I'm not including the wording on the top right, but you can if you would like to. There is no problem with her when it comes to the rule of thirds. She fits in very well, and I do think it actually is effective because you can put the words on the top right and they complement each other. If she were centered, it would kind of fight with the wording. It would look kind of awkward. Now on imagine, it's the very top row where the focal point is, the entire top row. So that adds a little bit of tension, which is good because the Dangles, if you'll look at the bottom of them, they create a fairly even row that goes up as you go to the right. Depending on how you angle your Dangles, it will create or help to create a certain kind of emotion. And in this case, them being angled up creates more of a positive, uplifting, energetic kind of thing. Or if it were straight across, it would be a calming thing. And so on Imagine, it's a kind of an interesting dynamic here. Going by the rule of thirds, you stay out of the center section. And on your lines, how you create your lines, that creates a different dynamic. And you put the two together, and it's pretty interesting, I think. The word imagine itself, being on the top row, creates a certain amount of tension, which is a positive thing. And the bottom row of the Dangles going up at an angle also creates tension in a positive way. So the dynamic between the two works very well together. I think it's extremely effective and I really like it. I kind of think I should have used a different color background, but that's neither here nor there. And on the mom, I really like the way it works here as well. I think both of these are very effective. They work great. The rule of thirds works with them, or they work with it very well. Awesome. If you have any questions about these two, please let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Let's take a look at the teddy bear image. You could say he takes up both columns on the far right, or if you look at the little diagram that I have, he takes up at least the bottom two sections on both the second and third columns. The far left and over half of the top row have supporting images, the butterfly, bees, bird, that sort of thing. I think this works very well with him. I see no conflicts at all. I think really there's not a lot to say about this one other than it works quite well. The center section is filled with him, but that is not an issue because the bottom center, right, the one above that one, they are pretty well filled with him as well. And the top two on the far right only have parts of him, but you can easily see that the center does not contain all of him or even remotely close. So yeah, works great. Okay, now on to the dandelions. The dandelions take up the top two sections on the left column and the bottom two sections on the center column. I could have and potentially should have included the bottom left corner section. What do you think? I did not include it because it only had a small amount. It had the two stems, two little leaves, and just a portion of one of the flowers. But I could have put that in there as well. On the center section, it does contain one entire flower and most of another flower. But I think because it's going down at a diagonal from the top left to the bottom center, it helps it flow, so it makes it easier to see where your focal point is. I think that's about it for today. We've covered quite a bit of information, gone over the rule of thirds pretty extensively, and quite a few examples. So I think we have a good grasp of it. But if you have any questions or would like to chat about it, please let me know, and I will talk to you again very soon. Much love, Olivia.